Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Oculomics Working Group and the Office of Strategic Coordination, I want to welcome you to the Common Fund Venture Program Oculomics Initiative webinar. I am Tony Gover. I'm a Program Director at the National Eye Institute. Today, I will be joined by two of my colleagues to help discuss this new initiative. So first, Katie, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks, Tony. I am Katie Malora. I work at the Common Fund, and I'm our Strategic Planning, Evaluations, and Communications team member. I want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the Oculomics website after, as well as the presentation slides after the meeting. And if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat as we go along, and we'll answer everything at the end.
Great, thank you, Katie. And Isaiah, could you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Isaiah Whitaker. I am a Other Transactions Agreement Specialist, and I'm working with the Division of Other Transaction Management.
Great, very much, Isaiah. So as Katie said, as we go through the Oculomics slide, please feel free to post your questions in the chat box, and the three of us will address all your questions at the end of the webinar. So next slide, please. Okay, so today I will introduce you to the new Common Fund Venture Program, discuss the Oculomics initiative and the research opportunity announcement, and finally we will address any of your questions. Next slide, please. And one more. So the Oculomics initiative is one of two new pilot programs launched under the Common Fund Venture Program. The Venture Program is a new initiative under the NIH Common Fund that was established just this year. The Venture Program will make Common Fund support available for novel, short-term, bold initiatives that embrace scientific risk. Ideas for new venture initiatives are submitted through the NIH Institutes, Centers, and Office Directors to the Office of Strategic Coordination, which oversees the NIH Common Fund. Potential venture initiatives are then prioritized by a venture board that is composed of 5 ICO directors who serve on staggered 3-year terms. The criteria for venture initiatives are that they emphasize innovation and speed and have the potential for significant impact both in biomedical and behavioral research. All venture program initiatives will be limited to 3 years and must have clearly defined goals and go and no-go milestones. The venture program initiatives will also be executed through an other transaction authority, which provides for flexible and streamlined management. And I will discuss the OTA mechanism in more detail in a few slides. Next slide, please. And one more. Oculomics is the area of study examining ophthalmic biomarkers of systemic disease for early disease detection, classification, and monitoring. Optical coherence tomography, or OCT, OCT angiography, and color fundus photography have demonstrated promise in detecting biomarkers associated with neurodegenerative, metabolic, and cardiovascular diseases. Current research in this area typically utilizes commercial retinal imaging equipment, large prospective cohorts followed over several years, and machine learning algorithms to identify systemic disease biomarkers. Unfortunately, several of the biomarkers identified for systemic diseases are non-disease specific. The lack of specificity and sensitivity of identified retinal systemic biomarkers makes the clinical utility of these biomarkers unclear. Numerous advanced imaging techniques have been developed in recent years that provide superior image resolution, signal to noise, and image depth compared to classical OCT, OCTA, and fundus imaging. Imaging techniques have also been developed to provide the ability for functional measurements and substance identification. The goal of this venture initiative is to support the development and application of novel, non-invasive ocular imaging technologies and tools to identify systemic disease biomarkers with high sensitivity and high specificity. Next slide, please. Example imaging technologies that have been underutilized or not utilized in the field of oculomics are identified at the top right of this slide. These non-invasive imaging technologies, and several others, have the potential to provide superior biomarker identification for a broad range of systemic diseases with the required sensitivity and specificity to have clinical utility. Funds from this Oculomics initiative will support the development and application of non-invasive imaging technologies and computer algorithms for identification of novel and clinically relevant biomarkers. It is anticipated that by the end of the 3-year period of performance, developed technologies will be demonstrated in appropriate animal models of disease or human patients. Next slide, please. As I stated, these efforts are executed under an other transaction authority. So the other transaction, or OT, is not a grant, it's not a cooperative agreement or a contract. And the Federal Acquisition Regulation, as well as the NIH grants policy, does not apply. Under the OTA, the applications do not go through NIH peer review, but are required to undergo objective review by a panel of subject matter experts. The criteria for objective review is defined in the research opportunity announcement. The OT is a very nimble mechanism that allows for relatively quick additions or subtractions of expertise, tools, technologies, partnerships, and other resources that arise as the project develops. The OT allows for change in scope, and NIH program may propose changes, although the changes are subject to agreement by the awardee. Importantly, there is no future commitment of funding, and funding segments are provided at 12-month increments, and every additional funding segment is subject to go, no-go milestones agreed upon at the time of award. Lastly, unlike regular research project grants or cooperative agreements, no cost extensions are not automatic. A no-cost extension may be considered on a case-by-case basis, but will require very strong justification. The expectation is that awards are completed by the end of the 3-year period of performance. Next slide, please. So the next few slides highlight a number of requirements specific to this research opportunity announcement that we want to bring to your attention. Details of the announcement may be found at https://commonfund.nih.gov/venture/Oculomics. So first, applicants must address at least one systemic disease in neurology, cardiovascular, or metabolic diseases or disorders. We strongly encourage applicants to form multidisciplinary teams that consist of academic and industry experts relevant to the research plan. This may include device developers, imaging bioengineers, vision scientists and clinicians, and biomedical scientists and clinicians with expertise in the specific systemic disease that is under study. This research opportunity announcement is not intended to support expansion of previous or ongoing efforts that currently utilize OCT, OCTA, or fundus photography. The goal of this venture initiative is to support the development and application of novel imaging technologies beyond OCT, OCTA, and fundus imaging. However, applications proposing new efforts that utilize these technologies and can demonstrate a novel approach or clear technological advancement over existing technologies may apply. Next slide, please. The research opportunity announcement has a requirement to submit a plan for enhancing diverse perspectives, or PEDP. Diverse perspectives can refer to the people who do the research and the places where the research is done, as well as who participates in the research as part of the study population. The PEDP must include a description of defined activities and actionable strategies for the inclusion of diverse perspectives, a description of how the PEDP will bring advantages or unique capabilities to the project, milestones for the evaluation of PEDP activity progress and success, an anticipated timeline of proposed PEDP activities. And it's very important to note that the PEDP is part of the criteria that will be scored during the objective review. Next slide, please. Another requirement of the research opportunity announcement is the submission of a data management and sharing plan. All applications, regardless of the amount of direct costs requested, must address a data management and sharing plan. Details on this requirement may be found at notice number NOT-OD-23-053. So the applicants must develop and maintain good documentation, and manuals or training materials. And finally, data should be made accessible as soon as possible and no later than the time of an associated publication or the end of the period of performance of the extramural award that generated the data. Next slide, please. So for PI eligibility and minimal effort requirements, more than one individual may be named as PI, but one individual must be identified as the contact PI. The contact PI must be employed by or affiliated with the applicant organization. If a multi-principal investigator or MPI application is submitted, an NPI leadership plan is required as part of the overall leadership plan. And then finally, the PI must commit at least 10% level of effort to the project. Next slide, please. So finally, per the research opportunity announcement, a letter of intent is required. The letter of intent must be submitted by an eligible organization's business official and not the PI. Only invited applicants meeting the letter of intent screening criteria will be eligible to submit a full application. The letter of intent requirements and screening criteria are clearly outlined in the research opportunity announcement. So the letter of intent is due on the 16th of April, and notification of screening results will be provided to the applicants on the 25th. However, applicants will not be provided any feedback on scientific or technical merit of the letter of intent, nor will the NIH make recommendations for improvements. Next slide, please. So we are operating on a very compressed timeline. The research opportunity announcement was released on the 11th of March, and letters of intent are due on the 16th of April. Final applications are due on the 27th of May, and the negotiation of 3 awards will begin on the 12th of June with the earliest start dates of the 1st of August. Next slide, please. So the requirements and objective review criteria for the full application are outlined in the research opportunity announcement. Applications must be submitted electronically via SIST on the 27th of May. And please note, even though the 27th is a holiday, late applications will not be accepted. Next slide, please. Okay, so with that, thank you for your attention. We're going to go ahead and answer the questions in the chat. If you have more questions, please put those in the chat now. If after the webinar you have more questions, please email them to oculomics@od.nih.gov or directly to me. So Katie, do we want to start taking questions?
Absolutely. We have one question in the chat that says, is this initiative limited to imaging technology? How about ocular electrophysiology like electroretinography, ERG?
Great. Yes, the projects must be image-related, imaging technology.
Another question, are foreign partners allowed? Are industry partners encouraged?
So industry partners are definitely encouraged. Foreign partners are allowed. So foreign partner cannot be the main or the prime on this award, but foreign components are allowed. So, for example, a sub-award, but you must justify why that foreign partner has a unique ability that they bring that you would not find in the U.S.
Another question, is it mandatory to have industrial partners?
No, it's not mandatory. What we really want to see is just an interdisciplinary team with all the components. So it doesn't necessarily have to be industrial partner if you have all the components from, say, academia or nonprofit organizations.
Can you please describe the review process in more detail? What kind of people make up the panel and what will the process be like?
Okay, so the letter of intent review will be done internally by the Oculomics working group. So we have representation from NINDS, NIBIB, NEI, of course, NIA, as well as Heart and Lung. So the external review panel for the objective review, once we have all the letters of intent in, we will make those invitations. So it really depends on the letters of intent and the types of topics we see, and then we will recruit reviewers for that external review. But just to be clear, just like the study section, that external review panel does not make funding decisions. They just provide us feedback on the objective review criteria that you can find in the research opportunity announcement. And then it's the Oculomics working group that will make a recommendation for funding to our directors.
Next question. Can we target multiple neurological disorders such as neurodevelopment and neurodegenerative diseases, or should we focus on one disease only?
Right, so we actually encourage you to focus on multiple diseases if you can do that within the 3-year period of performance.
Is optical coherence elastography considered a suitable technology?
Sure, I don't see why not.
Okay. Another question about focus on one disease or multiple diseases, which we answered. Can you explain what the kind of researcher innovator is envisioned by this initiative? Is someone who already has a background working with something of a venture capital biodesign background, for example?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. Dina, if you want to clarify your question a little bit, we can come back to it. What is typical budget size for a team with 1 PI and 1 PI or clinician?
So the budget size is completely dependent on the objectives that you put in your application. The maximum award amount can be $1.6 million in total costs each year for 3 years. But again, the appropriate budget size is dependent on what you're proposing.
Can it be industrial partners only?
Yes, absolutely. There's no requirement to have academic or nonprofit organization as part of the team.
Do one of the milestones have to focus on implementation and deployment of the technology?
Well, certainly at the end of the period performance, we expect a demonstration in the appropriate animal model of disease or human patients. So to me, that would be, deployment of technology. What we're not looking for is validation of the technology, the biomarker, because we realize that would require much larger human use studies.
Can you please provide examples about OCT, OCTA, fundus photos would be considered as an appropriate technology? It seems that you want other technologies beyond these.
Right. So the focus is really on those non-commercial technologies, these more advanced technologies that have come out in the last, half dozen years or so. Having said that, we left in room for OCT and OCTA and fundus photography for potential novel applications that we're simply unaware of. So if you can demonstrate the utility of those and a technological advancement, and that is laid out within the research opportunity announcement, then we would certainly take a look at those projects.
Would a modified visual field test like static or kinetic perimetry be considered imaging technology?
I would say on first pass, no, but I'm happy to talk to you offline and get the details.
Okay. What is an example of a project utilizing OCTA that may be eligible? Also, is it advised that a PI submit more than one proposal, or should each PI ideally only submit one proposal?
So again, we have not identified projects utilizing OCTA or OCT that would be appropriate for this announcement. That would be really up to you to demonstrate that to us. Yeah, PIs are certainly welcome to submit or be on more than one proposal. That's perfectly fine. It's not encouraged or denied.
The shortened timeline would make one believe that the initiative has already identified likely candidates or researchers or businesses for the project. Can you comment?
Sure, absolutely. No, not at all. We have not identified any individuals, technology, The reason for the timeline is actually quite simple. It's because we need to extend the funds at the end of this fiscal year. So the venture initiative was kicked off at the beginning of this fiscal year, really, and we need to commit the funds by the end of September. That's the only thing driving the timeline.
We have a question about venturing. If we are not PIs from academia, should we establish a venture to get the grant?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly do not have to be part of academia. Industry, nonprofits, certainly welcome to apply.
We have a question about, please link me to the page where the presentation will be posted. Isaiah, I'm not sure if you can put that in the chat for everyone. That'd be very helpful. Will the funds include clinical assessment and FDA approval costs?
Could you repeat that for me, Caitlin?
Sure. Can you link to the Oculomics FAQs page, please, and put that in the chat?
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so we'll fund. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I would say in general, no, we're not expecting projects that would get to the point of where you're submitting to the FDA and getting approval for a new diagnostic, right? We're looking for projects that are lower TRL, technology readiness level, and have higher risk. So if something is already to the point within a year or two of getting FDA approval, I think that might not be appropriately aligned to this announcement, but I'm happy to talk offline with you and get the details.
Next question. Assuming that since the focus is on systemic diseases, are diabetic eye diseases not preferred?
Correct. So we're not looking at the diseases of the visual system. We're really, the focus is on the systemic disease itself.
Would an imaging technology for cornea be eligible? For example, using an in vivo confocal microscopy for imaging epithelial nerve fibers for the purpose of diagnosing diabetic peripheral neuropathy?
Great. This is a great question. So in fact, you do not have to focus on the retina. I know we say retina a lot in the research opportunity announcement, but that's just because a lot of work has been done in that area already. But no, as long as it's non-invasive and imaging, you can image any part of the eye for diabetes, absolutely.
Does the program focus on clinical studies or technology, new technology?
Great. So clinical studies, the focus is really on utilization of new technologies. Having said that, certainly at the end of the peer performance, human clinical studies would be allowed for demonstration of the technology. But again, we're not really looking for validation type studies. That means that project is beyond the scope of this mechanism.
By the end of year 3, do you expect demonstration of use of the technologies in humans, or animal models will be sufficient?
Right. So either is so animal models are sufficient, and the reason we said it that way is particularly for technologies that say are using laser powers or ultrasound powers that would be over the typical limit that would be allowed by the FDA, then you would have to go through quite a bit of work to get ID then to study in humans. So if you have an appropriate animal model, we're happy to see that demonstration there as well.
Are you looking for people who have experience bringing innovations to the market?
Sure. I mean, if they're part of the research team, that would, I think, be a plus.
We have a question about your correct email address for Tony Gover. I don't know if you want to read that out for everyone.
Oh, sure. And it is in the research opportunity announcement. So it's Tony.Gover, and it's Gover at NIH.gov.
Is there a particular number of participants that you would like to see?
So we certainly want a robust list of applicants at the letter of intent stage. We are planning to award 3 awards, full applications. So we hope to see at least several factor more than that come in.
Can we expect the same venture initiative fund a year from now, or is funding more of a one-time thing?
Right. So part of the venture program is that these are one-time opportunities. Having said that, if the individual ICs think there would be fruitful to continue these types of efforts, but that would be on the individual ICs, not the common fund.
Okay. Would swept source OCTA be an appropriate imaging modality?
Yes, I think in general, yes, but again, happy to talk to you offline and get the details.
How many awards do you anticipate to fund?
We anticipate 3 awards.
Isaiah put the link to the Common Fund FAQs page in the chat, so everyone has access to that now if they would like to take a look. Next question, could you clarify this point from earlier that you're not interested in applicants who already have FDA approval?
Right. So the and I'm happy to talk with you offline about this, but in general, the imaging technologies we're talking about are not commercially available or approved. They might be approved for use in humans, but not approved as a clinical device. So we're expecting, again, newer technologies. So again, I'm happy to talk with you offline.
Would pupillometry or eye tracking qualify as acceptable imaging techniques?
That does sound appropriate to me, but again, I'd be happy to talk in detail offline.
Would deep learning AI algorithms apply to existing OCT or OCTA imaging for purposes of investigating systemic diseases be within the funding scope of this application?
Potentially. Again, I'd have to get the details offline. This one sounds equivalent to what is currently being under investigation. So I'd have to talk to you offline about the details.
Is there an emphasis on developing new imaging hardware versus machine learning algorithms for existing hardware?
Right. So the emphasis is definitely on the technology and the imaging hardware itself. And doesn't necessarily have to be new imaging hardware, just application of newer technology. Really, the machine learning and the algorithms come in when they're kind of required for even the use of the imaging technology, right? So sometimes you have to have the machine learning, the algorithms for you to detect the biomarker with the technology. So the focus is on the technology itself. But it's also not, so then let me clarify. Machine learning, computer algorithms, if you do not need those for your technology, they're not required.
Is the ultimate goal to translate the imaging technology in humans, maybe beyond the initial 3 years?
Yes, yes, it is, but definitely beyond the initial 3 years. Again, we would not support, say, validation of the technology with large human studies in this 3-year period of performance, but presumably those types of studies would be needed for this to be translated for a clinical device, which would require additional funding after the initial 3-year period of performance.
Will you potentially look to combine aspects of different projects akin to ARPA-H?
So if you're referring to combining different aspects from the initial 3 awards, the answer would be no at this point.
So you said that validation studies are not what we are looking for. What about studies that are doing validation of one of the recently developed imaging technologies that you mentioned in the ROA, i.e. adaptive optics, OCT, etc., in a clinical population with particular systemic or neurological diseases?
Yeah, that might be appropriate, actually. Again, I'm happy to talk with you and get the details offline.
I would be interested in being able to follow this initiative, learning what projects are eventually funded and the composition of successful teams for the Oculomics funded projects. What would be the best way to stay informed?
So Katie, this might be actually for you. So
Yeah.
we'll have the on. Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say that please, you can sign up for the listserv on the Oculomics website that's on the screen, and that was also linked by Isaiah earlier. We'll be putting out funding announcements for the future for Oculomics, as well as related funding initiatives and information about awardees and projects that have been awarded. So that's the best way to follow up. You can also follow the Common Fund Twitter account to be updated regularly. Okay, next up, can the funds be used to add novel technology to already commercialized technology?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no issue there.
All right, we have a few from the Q&A sections. Let's see here. Can you explain what the kind of researcher innovator is envisioned by this initiative? Is someone who has a background working with something of venture capital, biodesign background, for example? I believe we had this answer or this question earlier.
Right. And so I guess I'm not following that question. So, again, we're hoping to see multidisciplinary teams that are appropriate for the research that is being proposed. So if that includes that type of expertise, that's fine.
Okay. Can you please share a template of what is expected in the LOI? Can the specific aims page be sufficient as an LOI?
So what is required in LOI is in the research opportunity announcement, and so the specific sections and page limits are really well spelled out. Katie, I don't know, would it be helpful to share my screen?
Sure. I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Can you see the LOI and support?
Yes.
Documentation? Okay. So this is what is required for the LOI. Again, it's outlined. There's a project narrative, which is a 5-page limit that includes a research idea, research strategy, personnel, and impact. We also require supporting documentation. So just the list of key personnel, references cited, and key personnel by sketches, 2-page limit per individual. And then the screening criteria is also really well outlined within the research opportunity announcement.
Okay, is this similar to the standard R01 12-page style with significance, innovation, and approach?
Right. So again, the research opportunity announcement outlines specifically what is required for the full application.
What is the rationale of promoting advanced technologies for systemic diseases screened at POCs where low cost is needed or preferred?
I'm not sure. What is the rationale for? So right now, what the biomarkers that have been identified from years of study, we're talking decades of study now, they show promise. But their clinical utility, as I pointed out, is questionable because of lack of specificity and sensitivity. We expect that studies from these types of mechanisms will advance the field where you would have enough specificity and sensitivity from these newer ocular imaging technologies that they would have clinical utility, again, in diagnosing, following the progression of disease and classifying disease.
Can cell lines or iPSC-derived cells be used in the proposed studies?
Sure, no problem there.
Let's see here. The 2-page version of the biosketch for the LOI is a unique requirement. Can you provide more guidance on specifically what sections in the standard 5-page biosketch should or shouldn't be included?
No, it just, whatever you feel is appropriate for this specific call, and I'll leave that up to you.
What will be
and keep in mind that I'm sorry if I could just, and that biosketch referring to this for the letter of intent. The biosketch for the full proposal is 5 pages.
What will be considered high rates of sensitivity and specificity?
So we don't have specific measures of that. You would have to demonstrate that to us.
Okay. Would multimodal device development of various biomarkers corroboration be of interest, putting structure and function together?
Sure. I mean, if it gets to the end goal of providing a biomarker with the appropriate sensitivity and specificity, yeah, no problem there.
So is it true in general that AI with standard imaging is likely to be as compelling as AI with advanced imaging that is not yet in the clinic?
Potentially. I'm happy to talk offline about the details.
Would the ultimate goal be screening or diagnosis of disease, low-cost POC, or advanced method?
So all of the above, right? So you know, if in the future, you know, we can have low-cost point-of-care screening methods, and as technology progresses, I think we would develop those types of technologies. But again, advanced methods we're also looking for. And right now, given the technology readiness level of these efforts, we're assuming that the focus now is on the advanced methods.
How many specific aims would be appropriate?
That's completely dependent on what you're proposing. It just needs to be within the budget limits and the 3-year period of performance.
What would you consider the optimal team structure for selection and success?
Again, this is completely dependent on what you're proposing to do and that you have all the components, right? So presumably you would have a vision scientist or clinician, someone familiar with these imaging technologies, engineer or so, and then there should be expertise in the systemic disease that you're looking at. But again, that'd be completely dependent on what you're proposing.
That's all of the questions we've received thus far. Please feel free to add any more questions to the chat or the Q&A section. We'll be happy to answer them for you. I'd also want to mention that if you have questions in the future as you're developing your proposals, please feel free to reach out through the Oculomics email address.
Okay, thank you everyone. Have a great day.